you think I'd have this down by now. Karen, could we have a roll call vote, please? Karen, are you on mute?
You'd think I'd
Dan,
have
we
it.
might have lost.
Too.
There you are.
Sorry. Commissioner Huntash.
Aye.
Commissioner Lorge.
Aye.
Commissioner Finneman.
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts.
Aye.
President Bain.
Aye. Agenda is approved. First action item on our agenda this evening is to approve the minutes of the June 22nd EDA meeting. I will entertain a motion or any edits to those minutes.
I would move to approve. Finneman.
And I'll
Motion by
second
Finneman.
Huntash.
Second from Huntash. Jenny, could we have a roll call, please? I'm sorry, Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Huntash.
Aye.
Commissioner Lorge.
Aye.
Commissioner Finneman.
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts.
Aye.
President Bain.
Aye. And minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is a resolution 713-2002-01 COVID-19 Grant Relief Program Support Resolution. This resolution was discussed with you in a workshop discussion previously, is now coming before you for approval. Dan, would you like to tee this up for us this evening?
If I could have Karen tee it up, she was the one that did a lot of the work on this one, so I'll pass it over to Karen.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right. So commissioners, this is a support resolution. We've discussed sorry about that. We've discussed this, that the business owners that hold licenses in the city of Forest Lake specifically for certain liquor licenses and then massage therapy have not been able to utilize their license in full. When the shutdown happened, I believe it was March 18th was the effective date that started. I think it was a total of about 84 days until they were able to reopen again. And so as we discussed, we were looking for some relief for them. This is a support resolution, and if you approve it, it would allow council to, well, not allow council, you'd support council in creating a relief package for them in the form of a grant. And the idea behind the grant being that it would qualify for the CARES Act and any refunding from that. The licenses are listed in the resolution. The dates, I think the beginning date is in the resolution. I don't have it in front of me, excuse me. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but it's for 2020. I don't think it extends beyond that. The CARES Act has to apply to 2020. So this would be you saying you're supporting council starting this program. And if you have any questions, we don't have details yet on a lot of this with the CARES Act specifically and how this can be applied. We do know it has to be in some form of a grant. Anybody has questions?
I would just chime in and add that this is a resolution of support. The same agenda item is on council's agenda this evening for approval. Should you, assuming you're, that you also approve support of that tonight.
I would move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I guess I would just note as a related topic, most of you know that the city did receive just over $1.5 million in CARES Act funding, and that was passed through from the state, from the federal government. We're in the middle of doing an assessment of how those funds can be used, as Karen mentioned in her tee-up of this, and certainly have potentially opportunity to report back. I know that there's been some conversation with our partners at the county on how they are using their funds, and that certainly is an item to have on radar and something we'll be thinking about and presenting more thoroughly once that evaluation's been done. So this is a small piece, but a piece that we've already kind of started and would have considered even without this CARES Act funding. The CARES Act funding just sweetens the pot a little bit. So just wanted to add that in. Any other further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I heard we have a motion and a second. Karen, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Roberts,
Aye.
Commissioner Huntash,
Aye.
Commissioner, have I been forgetting Sam? I do apologize. Commissioner Husnick, Commissioner Lorge,
Aye.
President Bain.
Aye. And resolution is approved. The next item on our agenda is continued discussion on the BR&E work plan. Dan, I think you've got some program goals and survey questions to put before us this evening.
I do. President and members of the EDA, I'm going to get my screen share here. Hopefully this all works out. Is everybody seeing a BR&E slide on your screen currently? Okay. Appearing on Zoom always makes me a little bit nervous to start, but it seems to be working. So the goal of tonight's conversation is just to sort of really kind of take the conversation about BR&E kind of from that early stage we were last meeting back in June, and really start to kind of hammer out some of the details, really get some scoping behind it. Let me click on it. So here's the rough timeline that we started with. As you can see, in June, we did the program introduction. That has been completed. We're now in July, where again, the primary focus tonight is feedback on the program goals and survey questions. That's the main feedback from tonight. This will transition then back into August. We'll finalize those goals and survey questions. We'll also finalize the agreement with the Chamber of Commerce. If you recall, that was originally scheduled for July, but we've had some conversations with the Chamber, and that seems to work better for both parties to move it to August at this point. It won't cause any delay in getting this program launched, so we're fine by moving that to the August meeting. And then in September, we are still well on track to launch the program to really start this BR&E effort in September of 2020. So the first step on this is to start kind of really looking at what are the goals of the program. And one thing to kind of keep in the back of everybody's mind is to start to look at this through sort of a scoping lens. But what I mean by that is to start looking at that through, some certain specific questions, such as, why are we doing this? What is the intent of this program? By launching this program, we're hoping to accomplish, these three main goal items. So those are some of the questions to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we start looking at what the goals are for the program. Also, one thing that I find helpful is that when developing goals is to look back at, imagine yourself at the end of the program and looking back, how will we know if it's successful or not? What is the thing that we really want to get taken away out of this BR&E effort that we're about to launch here? When you look at program goals for a BR&E program, these really are the foundation of the project. This is the foundation, this is the ground level. Everything that we sort of work on builds off of the goals for the program. You'll start to see as we get further on how the survey questions really work hand in hand with the program goals. So a lot of the advice I can give to the EDA is to really do clearly defined program goals, because that'll give you a lot better success in your survey questions and a lot better success overall with the program. What I did to kind of start the conversation was I did go back and I looked at what were the goals back in 2011. Now, if you recall, back in 2011, we did a full-blown BR&E program focusing on both retention and expansion. This one, based on initial feedback, we really kind of want to look at that retention strategy and not necessarily focus as much on the expansion side of it, just kind of given current economic conditions. So one thing I did, I went through those 5 goals that were set up for that original program, and I kind of broke them down into more the macro level, which is sort of the broader, kind of more ambitious goals, and then more the micro level, which is, kind of the more executable, goal set, and then started kind of looking at what those original 5 were and kind of broke those down into those macro and micro lenses. What you kind of see here, or another frame of reference for that would be to look at these goals kind of in the same way as our existing work plan, where we kind of have that overarching large goal, and then we have the executables. The large goal would be like that macro goal, and the executables would be more of that on that micro level. So here in 2011, the goals of the program were, number 1 was to demonstrate support for local business. That one kind of falls into both that macro and micro level. Second was to help solve immediate business concerns. Again, I put that one in more the micro level. Increase local businesses' ability to compete in the local economy. It's a larger goal. It kind of encompasses the community as a whole. So that was put into the macro category. To establish and implement a strategic plan for economic development. Again, kind of a more aspirational goal. It's a larger one, so that falls into the macro level. And then to build community capacity to sustain growth and development. Again, kind of a larger term, longer term goal, so it falls into that macro category. When I kind of looked at what was done in 2011 and kind of looked at what we are hoping to, based on initial feedback, I think one of the recommendations I have for this particular program is to really try to focus on that more micro level. A few reasons for that is that I think by doing a survey at this point, we're going to pick up the impacts of COVID. No matter how that survey questions are worded, we're going to start to see what are those impacts that COVID is having on the economy. And I think if you look at that from a perspective of, say, 3 years down the road, we're either going to be in a temporary time frame or a transitional time frame. What I mean by that is, let's say 3 years the pandemic has gone away, it's no longer impacting the economy. We'll look back at this as sort of a point in time where we had to temporarily adjust policies to address the impacts that COVID was having on the economy. Or if we're still, and hopefully not, dealing with some of the repercussions of the COVID impact in 3 years from now, this could be a transitional time where we transition from the pre-COVID economy, had to look at on a business level, putting in different social distancing guidelines, different, disinfecting, that type of protocols, and transition to kind of in that post-COVID economy. I think overall, you're also going to see that some of these results might not age well, again, just kind of given the current state of the economy. So these results may not have the same shelf life that a normal BRNE survey would have, like say the one that we did back in 2011. Again, I think it's just good to understand that going into this program. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that the results aren't going to age well. I think we're trying to capture a point in time. And I think that's where this survey should really focus. A benefit of capturing that point in time, it does make us more responsive to the immediate conditions that we see out in the economy. If we kind of set up our goals to say we would want to try to be as responsive, short term as possible, by focusing on the micro, we should be able to do that long, and then get our policies in line with sort of what the current conditions are, but as well as kind of keep an eye on what that longer term implications would be. So I think it's okay at this point to really kind of focus on more of a micro level than trying to come up with the longer term macro level goals for the program. So I kind of started with just some goals here. I think as you go through them, they're definitely goals that are primed for some additional wordsmithing. These are just kind of a first cut of what could be established as some program goals for this one. First one is just bringing forward that goal from the original work plan to demonstrate support of local businesses. I think that is still current in today's market and economy. The second one, this addresses the impacts of COVID-19 and says to identify and solve immediate business concerns due to COVID-19. It kind of allows for that responsiveness due to what businesses are facing. The third one is better alignment of policy development with the needs of local businesses to make sure that our policy walks hand in hand with what we're seeing for needs. This fourth one is the reopening up or open up channels of communication between local government and local business. I think that these channels are primed at this point for those to be reopened. And I think by setting it as a goal kind of establishes that is one of the, primary drivers of this program. Also is to educate businesses on local and county business related programs that are currently available. If anybody's been kind of tracking the amount of policies and programs that are coming out, there seems to be kind of a lot of them coming forward at one point. The Chamber has done a really good job of getting businesses educated, but as we kind of move forward, that we, kind of continue that education process for our local business community. And kind of along that line would be to develop a warehouse of local business contact information and resources. And then finally would be the promotion of open to business within the local business community. Again, those are just some possible ones, just as that kind of starts the conversation. And I think right here is kind of what I'd like to do is kind of pause the presentation and just kind of get some initial feedback as to what the EDA really kind of wants to focus their goals on for this BRNE program.
And do you mind flipping back to that goal slide as a discussion point for this conversation? Members of the EDA, if you look at 2020 program goals and think about how we want what we want activities focused on, your thoughts on if you've hit the mark, any edits you'd like to see, anything we're missing?
Seems like there's a lot of goals, maybe too many.
Yeah.
I think some of these are probably
Especially for
subpoints.
this program. I'm sorry, keep going.
I was saying, I think we could probably group them into like maybe 3/4 the max, and a couple of these are sub points. Like promotion of open a business really falls up under educate businesses on county related programs. So those don't need to be called out twice. So other than just truncating them a little bit, as the other thought as I read through this was that warehouse of local business contact information. Is that going to reside long term with the chamber or with the EDA?
I think the intent would be that for the chamber to collect it and then the city has access to it. So I think it's a dual stream,
Gotcha.
with the way the agreement, as the way it's envisioned right now, is the chamber collects that business contact information, but we still have access to it. So it's shared data.
Gotcha.
I have a similar comment in that I think there's a lot of words on the page for a program that may not have the funding to fully support all of those activities. And I'd rather us go deep on a couple of really important key topics and recognize that some of these other topics are going to be covered anyway in other areas of the EDA. And perhaps we look to have those goals be housed elsewhere and not rely on this program with the chamber to be the means of execution. I'd rather us be more precise and impactful than just so broad. Just my 2 cents as I look at these. Other feedback items?
I do agree that some of the items fold well under.
If I could ask just a quick question, is there anything that is glaringly missing from this that the EDA would want to, roll up into one of those 3 or 4 max goals? I mean, is there something is there a blind side in it that is not on this page?
I think Finn's audio may have cut out.
With the better alignment of, I'll go back to the last one. Oh,
Oops, sorry.
with the better alignment of policy development with the needs of local businesses, will that be involving planning? Planning and zoning?
in terms of, I see that more as like an economic policy. Like if, you know, the
Okay.
example that I saw was on the fascia program or the downtown grant program, where the amounts were a little bit higher than what a lot of business programs were going to sustain. So I think we see our policy, because that policy is kind of developed outside of feedback from the business community. So I think that, you know, if we start to collect some questions on, you know, policy development, you know, we're going to align that better.
I wonder if the, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th and 7th bullets could get condensed. And I wonder if they get condensed and they are of lesser priority, given that we have other mechanisms of doing that through EDA and other things. I'd really like focus to be on, and number one is just so obvious. I hope by doing this, we are demonstrating that support. We could wrap that in somehow. I think I'd like to see the focus on our work plan items to be on 2 and 3. Identify and solve immediate concerns. This is the tactical things. What are we doing? And I hope that there's some near-term, shorter-term things in that come out of that list. And then out of that is item 3, which is the longer term. What are things we need to be doing differently as an EDA and as a city to have better policy development to support business? Those are those long-term things that take some more headspace and policy space to get done, but are identified as barriers to, you know, business retention and growth in Forest Lake. So the other areas are really important, but I think if we get too watered down, we're going to be, we're not going to see the results we're looking for. And also, I want this program to be recognized, that businesses see it as, oh, we are doing something, and they're feeling that attention. And if we're too broad, I'm afraid that we're not going to hit that mark. Other feedback items, anything that anyone feels is missing from this list? I'm not hearing any.
Nope, looks good,
I'm
Dan.
also, okay. I'm seeing a lot of you are on mute as well. So if you're talking, take yourself off mute. All right, Jen, you want to move on to the next step here, and maybe that'll generate some more discussion.
Yep. So now we're the next portion of this conversation is on the survey questions, and the reason why I put these two together is that you see that, you know, survey questions really go hand in hand with the project goal. So the project goal is start to align the questions that'll be used to go out and actually collect the information or collect the data that's out in the field. I don't have, you know, I didn't draft, you know, questions specific to this survey because I wanted to make sure that I kind of got the goals framework set up first. But I wanted to give the EDA just at least a couple of different examples of what do some of the questions look like. If you go to page 9 of your packet, there's the sample community business survey for COVID-19. This document was actually drafted by the University of Minnesota. This came as a result of a call I was on with the extension service, and they're kind of talking about, you know, what can you do for a retention-focused BR&E activity. So they gave us some sample questions that can be we can use and are also being used by other communities as they engage in their retention efforts. I think overall, kind of given the fact that we're scaled back, we don't want to do the full 75 question survey that was done before. We're kind of looking for a quick 10 or less, 10, you know, right around 10 question survey, so we can go in there, get the information that we need, and then also not take up an inordinate amount of time of the business owner's day. As I mentioned in the memo, typically, you want to put a couple of survey questions in there that you can actually collect data for to create some baselines, some questions that kind of have the guided answers, such as like the first one on this page, which what's the current status, open, closed, or reopened. So you can go back and start to see what percentage are open, what percentage are closed, what percentage are reopened. Throwing in that type of questioning with some open-ended questions, open-ended questions have done a lot of survey work. You get a lot of information in terms of what you get on an open-ended question. Sometimes that's where the most enlightening parts of the survey come from. Unfortunately, it's tough to really benchmark open-ended questions because you never know what the answer is going to be. So kind of doing a mix of, open-ended questions as well as more of the guided questions is recommended, so we can at least have some, get some good charts out of that, but also get some good kind of just honest feedback from the business community is what would be recommended for the survey question here. So I just kind of gave you the sample questions for the COVID-19, and then also on page 12, these are ones that were done as kind of a more general business survey that would be done, say, outside of a COVID environment. So these are kind of your more standard business survey questions. What I'd recommend is that now that we have the goals kind of established, is to take kind of a blend of these two different surveys here and kind of come up with one that really drives home those goal points that we will determine here at the next meeting. But just kind of wanted to get the EDA aware of what the surveys look like, what the questions are, because again, these will be the questions that will be asked of the businesses when we go out and do the survey work here beginning in September. So at that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the survey. If there's any specific questions you want to make sure are included, let me know. We'll draft those in. But at this point, it's more for EDA awareness and initial feedback on what was presented.
So Dan, did I hear you say that you're going to combine some of these?
Yeah, it's kind of a blended. I mean, I think with the fact that if we're looking at a COVID response, we have to acknowledge COVID in the survey questions, to make sure that we're getting that back. But also taking a look at it, if we're looking at, the glancing at the long-term, policy development, is maybe put some of the more standard questions that you would see in a non-COVID environment in there. Again, these are very general survey questions. The ones that actually will be brought forward in August will be very specific based off the goals that we just discussed moments ago.
Okay.
And reading through the questions, the standard ones, not the COVID ones, the only thing that pops off the page at me looking at questions 5, 6, and 7 is that the interviewer is asking the business owner, is there anything, are there any priorities? And the training and things I've attended, I would change that to more presumptive, like using the word what. What can the city or EDA do to help your business grow and expand? What priorities would you like to help identify? So that would be the one, just get rid of the word any, because they don't think of anything.
And then I'd add, if you're doing a form like this, add a lot more space to write in between 5 and 6 and 6 and 7, especially after 6.
Absolutely.
I love that it can maybe just be on one page. The simplicity of that will be appealing to both the EDA person as well as the business owner.
Agree. Other feedback items?
And I was just going to also add to one thing, when the questions are done, I'll run them through some timing just so we can get an idea of what the kind of time ask is. So if we call the business owner up, we can say, we have 10 questions. It takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes to answer. So we can kind of frame that in where, I mean, obviously with open-ended questions, that survey could take longer, but if we can kind of say it's approximately this many minutes worth of time, they'll know what that time ask is before we go in there and start that conversation.
Will these be phone surveys or in person or both?
I think it's going to be a combination of both. I mean, I think it's probably, just kind of due to COVID at this point and kind of the unknown that's really going to present and the mechanisms for surveys. I think it's at this point, all options are on the table. Some can be done in person, you know, as social distancing allows, potential for Zoom calls as well, and then, you know, phone. So, I mean, sort of a blend of all three. But again, if we were doing this in pre-COVID, I'd recommend for in person, but I think kind of the current environment is going to be a blend of all three.
For over the phone, it would be handy if they had this in front of them, if they could get it emailed to them so that when you're calling them, they've got the information in front of them rather than listening, because I don't know if I could retain all these options like under 5 when I'm talking to somebody on the phone, if I'm the one being called. So it'd be nice if we could get their email when we set up a time to call them and email it to them so they can have it in front of them. And if they get an email of it ahead of time, it also gives them a few minutes or a few hours to think about what the EDA or the city could do for them. You know, maybe they can't think of something right off the top of their head, but if they've got time before the phone call, they can think about it. And maybe even consult with other people in their business.
Dan, I think the other thing I would add to the survey, and at risk of making it too long, I think things can be balanced, is anything that's pertinent to the chamber that they'd like to add that, you know, certainly related, but maybe of something that they have in mind that's supportive of their mission. If there's something they'd like to see, let's make it truly a collaborative effort. All right. Any other feedback on the survey items? Dan, next steps for this? Do you want to just summarize for council what we expect to see next?
So next, what you'll see, I'll take these back. I'll kind of wordsmith up the goals, take the feedback, you know, from tonight's meeting. You get those 3 to 4 goals really, you know, crafted. And then based on those, I'll get the questions, you know, we'll get the format of the questions. We'll get all those initially drafted. That'll all get packaged up and brought back to during the August meeting for EDA review and final, you know, hopefully approval at that point. There's not too many changes to it. I'll also kind of work on what some of the survey, you know, avenues are going to be. What's it look like? Is it going to be primarily phone? How do we get the survey information out to the, you know, people taking the survey in advance? So kind of the more boots on the ground type, you know, questions and, you know, answers at the next EDA meeting. And then we'll still plan on going live in August, or excuse me, in September. Also, we'll start to develop at the next meeting is the initial list. You know, hopefully I'll have that ready to go so we can start to take a look at, here's the business survey. We're going to look at these businesses for the first round and make some additions and subtractions to that list. So August will be more on the finalization of the goals and the survey questions, as well as the business list determination. And then from there, we'll do the full execution and the start in September. So that first meeting in September, hopefully if everything's wrapped up and there's not a lot of changes from August, we can get everything approved and start working early in September. And if we do need a second meeting in September, we can use that second meeting as the one to, you know, get it finally buttoned up. But I'm shooting for a full execute, or the start of it, that first meeting in September.
That makes sense. Members of the EDA, any further questions of staff for this? All right, not hearing any. I think we're ready to transition to our next agenda item, which is your boat club discussion. Patrick or Dan, I'm not sure which one of you are leading us through this.
Yeah, I'll take over this. This is, I also have Donovan's here to back me up because he knows a lot more about it than I do. But there was an inquiry regarding the expansion of the boat marina downtown off the park. We got the same request back in March and sent the gentleman whose name escapes me offhand, basically the same information here regarding what might be possible and how how they have to proceed to expand the marina if that's the desire. And basically, bottom line is the first step obviously is for the your boat club doc to submit some kind of a concept, or at least give us an understanding of what's necessary and how large of an increase they may want. This will be a long process because it requires basically an environmental review, permitting by the DNR, and has to go through the Plan Commission for conditional use. As the memo outlines, even if they wanted to expand it, they couldn't expand it now until they get permission from the DNR. So it's basically starting the whole process over for expansion. If the EDA or the council's interested in moving forward with this or the possibility of expansion, it's really up to the boat doc to start that process, and he or whoever is involved can contact us, and we'll start and see if that's possible. The city is the permit holder. We would have to pay the DNR whatever the fee is. I think it was an escrow fee of what was that, $10,000. And traditionally, like we do with other developers on other items, we'd bill this back to my boat doc to reimburse the city for any expenses that they have incurred with this type of a project. So we just brought it forward for discussion since we had the inquiry. If there's interest, if there's not interest, and that's where I'll leave it to the EDA to start to discuss.
Did I understand?
Thank you, Patrick. Go ahead.
Did I understand correctly that there has not been a submittal at this point to the extent of the expansion?
There has been no submittal. All there was an email inquiry on what we would have to do or what the process was, or some interest in expansion. And a similar response as the EDA has received tonight was forwarded to the gentleman who inquired, and waiting for some future communication.
One of the questions that might be asked of them is to somehow give us a sense of their how their economic status is right now, given the business and the volume they have. Again, I qualify that with the time period that we're in, but in typical years, what kind of business have they had? Are they not reaching, I don't know, critical mass? Does their projections or their perform only work if they expand from here on, or can it work as it is? I've always had a hesitancy to put more objects out there between the green space and the water. As much as I want the economic platform to work, the more and more we diminish that connection to the water, I think from green to water, the more we start to look like the White Bear Lake section near the grocery store on the south end. And that becomes an image that changes everything. We still have the boat ramp and the public access dock, and it's starting to get more and more in that realm. So I'm concerned about that view, that image out past the park into the lake.
Yeah, and just to answer your question about their economics, we have no knowledge of what they are at this point. They haven't, like I said, responded or conversed with us regarding why they want it, if they're in trouble, if the expansion will help them save their business, or if it's just because there's the demand. So we don't know any of those particulars at this point.
Okay.
If I could also add something, 2 years ago or so, I did receive just an informal inquiry from a representative of the company asking about it. So their desire to expand is not particularly, COVID related, though it may at this time. And another thing that occurred to me is a step for them to take is simply go out there and measure the depth of the water, since their public waters permit doesn't allow any sort of dredging or excavation of that floor bed, that lake floor. So that would be a really simple and inexpensive way to find out if it's even possible to initiate the steps that Pat described.
Donovan, just to quickly add to your comment about elevation, back when the original application went on, the city did complete a survey in a grid system that probably is in the original file.
Okay, I can look for
Ryan,
that.
you're really quiet.
So I was just saying, related to the elevation comments, back in the original application, the city did do a survey that's within a grid system outlined all the elevations from the shoreline out. I can't remember how far we went out, but that might be in the original file and information already available.
Would these slips be strictly for people renting the boat club boats and not to the public? Are there going to be any slips available for somebody that lives in Forest Lake to rent the slip?
Again, we don't have what the current concept for expansion is and what would or would not be allowed at the boat slip. I think they're all for rent. I'm not sure if there's a predisposition for Forest Lake residents or not. In any current agreements, I haven't regarded that. We'd have to ask the applicant if those were possible or what their intent was. And again, it goes back to how many more slips are we talking about, and then what's the ratios?
So I can maybe add a little bit to some questions here. I did have a conversation a couple weeks ago with Brian Wagner. He's the regional guy. They have obviously, you may or not know that they have a number of locations throughout the state. And so this COVID thing, like a lot of different industries, boating, campers, whatever, people are spending their money on those types of items. They're not traveling as much. And so the demand is great. Tim's Marina I had a conversation with them. They have 85 slips out there. And he said he could sell probably another 15 to 20 this year. Just the demand is just there. And so I think that although the COVID did slow things down, I know he did make that inquiry before all this came. And then they've just been trying to figure out what kind of year they're going to have. And it turned out to be much greater than they expected. So I think that's when the conversation got brought back to maybe exploring to see what can happen. As far as the allotment, yeah, it's probably the same ratio, and I don't really know what that is. They would have space for more of their own boats to be there for the club members and to rent out, and then additional slips for whether you're a resident of Forest Lake or not. As much as Mark, I agree with your concern as well. I think I'd like to see something happen here. If we can do it tastefully and not infringe much more on the current view from if you're sitting in the park looking out, because that I think is just a huge asset that we have for people coming and visiting downtown. But also, like White Bear, if you have a boat down there, you're going to come to Forest Lake. You're going to use the restaurants if you're living in Blaine or Shoreview or something. So it's just another way to generate more traffic to downtown. And I think that's what we're all here for, is to try to do that. But it has to be done tastefully and not to disturb the environment the least amount as possible.
I have a question around logistics of the project when the original partnership was done. I understand that the city is the permit holder, but did we drive that project, or was the kind of the project driven by your boat club, and we were, the kind of the partnering agency that, is the permit holder, but the logistics and next steps were driven? Who drove the project? And I guess I ask that now because, and I wanted this to be on the agenda tonight for a number of reasons, one of which is we're getting ready to start the downtown meetings, and every time we talk about downtown, expansion of the docks always comes up. And so I wanted us to have some background on how we've gotten this far and what we might do and what next steps might be for taking it to the next level for an expansion. And so when it was done initially, again, as staff's memo outlines, there are a number of regulatory hoops to jump through. Did we drive that bus last time, or was it your boat club with kind of us alongside as the partner? How was that work distributed?
I don't know if any, go ahead.
I would say, Ryan, do you recall that one?
It was privately led with a lot of red tape they had to go through. I think they stopped short on the size that they landed on because they wanted to avoid the EAW. And with the EAW comes not just on water things to look at, but then the whole traffic elements and the parking lots and how busy downtown already was. And then it was starting to push up against a wall. You had the downtown businesses not wanting more traffic that wasn't going to be using their services. So they landed where they did, and things been operating very well. And like Blake reiterated, obviously the boating and the interest in locally used facilities has increased all over the state. Isn't just the only place that you see an increase on some of that stuff. But when you're jumping into the EAW at this level, you're talking $30,000 to $50,000. So they most likely would be striving to get all these slips for their business purposes and not for additional slips for Forest Lake residents.
Well, they're receiving that revenue though, right? Of the slips. We get $10,000 basically, but they receive all the revenue for the slip rental, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think there's a cost sharing in the contract. That sounds about right.
And I would add to that 10,000 seems like a heck of a deal. If something were to go forward, I think the city needs to get a little bit more out of it. And it'd be nice to see some type of a more public use of that, some type of a fishing pier or something to that extent where there's more benefit to the city residents since it is city land. But either way, I just think, something to try to continue the conversation at least. I personally think, if you want people, again, downtown thriving, you just need people and more people down there, and that's going to do that. It just has to be done correctly.
Somebody mentioned that dredging is not an option for a project of this type or a permit of this type. But wasn't there also a proposal that council considered a few years back on dredging? I think I was just maybe new to council at that time. How do those two things fit together, and maybe they don't? I'm just trying to better understand.
Yeah,
because that area is shallow, and if there's some requirements of depth, that there's some limitations to that property.
Yeah, I can't comment on what would have to be done in the future, but the current permit is very clear that there is no dredging allowed, period. They just can't do it. And it says no excavation will be allowed the facility now or in the future. If maintenance is necessary, the shallow site is not suitable for marina use. No expansion and permit amendment will be allowed without the completion of an environmental review process. So basically they cannot dredge anything until they go through a whole new process, environmental review and starting expansion. And what the permit basically says, if it's too shallow, a boat can't get in there, then they have to dredge, then it shouldn't be a marina.
And I did pull up that depth survey that was done on this approximately 190-foot dock. It's about 2.5 feet out there. And it seems to drop only, 4 inches in the next, 50 feet. And then the drops off a little bit more by like 300 feet out, up to about 4.5 feet.
I think the further out you go, though, it would help be less of an impediment to blocking the view instead of going across the front of the beach more directly out. But then it gets back to what the DNR would allow there. But I think that would be a better scenario and not have then the depth issue if you're going out as opposed to going across or in front of the park.
So primary hurdles seem to be at this point, next steps related to the environmental assessment and going through that whole process, and then any potential limitations that might be imposed because of depth requirements and not being allowed to excavate. Ryan, am I mistaken was it a different portion of that beach that we were going to excavate? Is that what I'm thinking of? Can you help me connect the dots?
For one, without even going to the process of an EAW, you automatically said you weren't going to dredge the bottom, and the DNR wouldn't support that unless you had proof that you wouldn't be disturbing the vegetation and aqua life down below. By dredging, you're stirring up all the bottom, that helps all the erosion with the wave action, and that's what the DNR would make you study through an EAW as well. With those depths, though, I wouldn't anticipate they would ever allow dredging. But if they can go farther out and whatever, it's only going to help the depth with everything. Even 1.5, 2 feet. Pontoon boats, small fishing boats, they can get right up to the shoreline. They were trying to get bigger originally to accommodate some of the bigger boats that, you know, are on the lake that wanted to come into downtown facilities, or your weekenders that put in and use the lake and then wanted to use the facilities in the business area. So, you know, it just depends on what type of boat you have, where you can go. So that's like every lake.
Was there not also a pending construction project or need at the existing ramp entry to the water? Wasn't there something that was going to be reestablished, reconstructed?
I can't remember when we had the significant ice damage that lifted the launch, but that was pretty easy fix. I know part of their conditions of approval were required to put in some water piping in case they had a fire, that they could access the gas stuff out of, or a boat out on the lake. So they had to do some minor utility improvements to meet the conditions of approval. I can't remember exactly what those were, but it was basically the deal if there was a fire on a boat while you're gassing it up.
I think this would be a lot easier for all of us to react to if what we did have was a graphic indicating, given existing conditions and future intentions, you know, and I'd see a lot more about what the impact would be. My tendency is to want to see if we can't scoot everything to the north and somehow compress the territory it's using within whatever safety factors are required. But I'd like to see that graphic.
Yeah, I think the next step is for, I mean, my boat doc to kind of have a sit down with us and say, okay, here's what we're thinking. Blake, the member you mentioned was different than the person that I had talked to earlier. So if you have a contact there, we'll be happy to talk to those people. You know, at least start the discussion and see what the interest is and what kind of an expansion they're thinking.
Yeah, I can get that to you. I think the takeaway would be to just let them know that we're interested. We're willing to, if it could be done, that rightfully that we want to, you know, we'd love to be able to partner with them somehow and try to make this happen. But it's a lot of it is out of our control too.
Agree. Any other questions on this topic? All right, not hearing any. Our next item on the agenda this evening is a chamber update. Nanette, welcome.
Must unmute. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Bain. We're just going to give you a little bit of an update about what's happening at the chamber. We did have our first face-to-face meeting, our luncheon last 2 weeks ago now. And so at the end of June, we did meet, and lower numbers, probably about, for this time of year, it was probably a third of what we expected, but there definitely are those folks who are looking forward and enjoy being out. We were social distance for sure. And, you know, again, like what you all know, it's a bit awkward, but not being able to shake hands particularly. And so, but it was really good. It was really good to be able to do some face-to-face activity along with our chamber visits and doing some ribbon cuttings and whatnot. And so we've been out and about a bit, but still doing quite a bit all via Zoom today. I've been Zooming most of the day. So that's where we're at with our member meetings. At this time of year, even on a non-COVID year, you will find that July and August are quite a bit slower for the chamber. Members are vacationing and doing all the things that all of you are doing as well. And so we do find that the interaction is much less. And so we're finding that, of course, at this time again as well. That's no surprise. One of the things that I'm working primarily on right now is the golf event. We do have the okay to go ahead with golf, and we did get approval to do a shotgun start, which is great. That's a great atmosphere for the event. And so I'm working with Brian out at Forest Hills, and we have just started to gather our sponsorships and registrations. And so that's been going well. If you haven't registered and you're interested in sponsoring or golfing, I encourage you to do so. I'm also working on food and trying to do some things a little bit differently with that as well. And then I have a wild card piece. One thing that the chamber has done for over 40 years is welcome all of the new educators to the school district, and that can be quite a number. We have our business folks that gather. We do a vendor event, and all of the teachers are then given gift bags where then they can go and meet with each of the vendor businesses and gather all kinds of goods, as well as we give away a ton of prizes at the actual luncheon itself. And so, you know, just watching how things are going, knowing that there's states that are cutting back. I don't see us having any big releases of large groups in the near future. And so I'll be having conversation with a couple of folks at the school district, as well as Leela, because that's who's involved, and just trying to come up with some unique, different ways that we can still celebrate those new educators. And so again, if you have any great ideas for that, I would welcome them. It'll be quite a bit different because again, you're talking almost 200 people were gathered before, and now we won't be doing that. So, and then the last piece again is just conversation with Dan on the BRNE, and he has sent me over the previous contracts and some of the previous information, as well as we've been in touch about all the current information that you folks have been discussing. And so I'm in conversation. I'll be meeting with our board of directors and reviewing that information to make sure that that all works in with our plan and time frame and whatnot. One of the things that I did share with Dan, because of just the inactivity of business, so to speak, their reaction, I should say, not that they're not working. Blake, I would never want to say that you're not working, but that they're just, you know, stepping back from, you know, like all of us, right? Summer is freer and kids are around and a lot more distraction, right? And so I think that, you know, looking into the fall is a great time frame in any case, whether it was COVID or not, to be starting to reach out to our businesses. So to be continued, I'll be meeting with our board of directors and having deeper conversation so that we can stay on track for the plan that Dan has set before you. So I think that's it. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Nanette this evening? All right, thank you.
Yep.
Our next item, Washington County update from Chris Eng. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, President Bain and members. Good evening. I think I may have mentioned at the workshop that the county board was considering putting a portion of their CARES money into business grants, and that actually will be an action item tomorrow on the county board meeting. So Washington County has received over $31 million from federal CARES Act funding from the state of Minnesota and originally federal government. And about 10 million will be designated for business grants within the county. So the intent is for the county to work with the CDA and the Open to Business program to get those dollars out into the hands of businesses really quickly. The grants will be in the form of about $15,000, and we're primarily trying to target employers, small employers that have more than one full-time employee besides the owner, and up to 50 full-time equivalents, and those businesses that make less than $3.5 million to start with. We do also allow, under a separate funding level, home-based businesses and businesses that are not employers but do have a place of location outside of the residence. And so that would be a grant of up to $7,500 depending upon eligibility and expenses. So if things went really well, the county board would likely approve the final policies for the program on the 28th of July. The CDA board would look at the 4th of August. And hopefully that following Monday, August 10th, we will begin taking applications directly through the Open to Business program and all online. And then the hope would be that we could do a 2-week window. So accept applications for 2 weeks, see what kind of demand we get, see what kind of need there is for the business funding. And honestly, we would like to open the discussion with the cities. If we do find out that the money goes really quickly and there's more need out there than what we can fund with our original allocation, we'd like to be able to explore the possibility of the cities putting funds into the county program and keep going to do more business grants across the county. So, but that would obviously require council consideration and obviously working with staff and council to design that and make sure it makes sense. If we find out that the money is not in high demand, which I don't think will be the case, but if it's possible, we would probably then open up the parameters a little bit and cast a wider net. So instead of 50 businesses, we would go up to maybe 175 or 100 businesses and maybe up to 5 million in total revenues. So we've got some flexibility. The intent is to try to focus on the smaller businesses first, the smaller employers, which I think based on our original parameters, we can probably estimate that about 95% of the businesses in the entire county will qualify for those original parameters. And if we find out that there's a greater need, we certainly will work very closely with all of the cities across the county to see if we can't do something more. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Quickly, just a question for you, Chris. Did you say that this is up for county board consideration at their meeting on the 28th?
So thank you, President Bain. That's a great question. So the county board held a workshop last Tuesday, and tomorrow is the full county board meeting to approve the dollar amounts. And then the next county board meeting would be on July 28th to approve the policies and procedures for the grant. And also then at the same time grant the money to the CDA for administration and to allow us to enter into an agreement with Open to Business to administer the program. And so you probably know Tyler, I'm sure. Tyler's been on this call before. Yeah. He would be the program manager for the grant program in Washington County.
Perfect. And if you were to consider a city partnership option and to make that available, what time frame would you be looking for that commitment?
President Bain, I would
there's
guess.
A lot of moving pieces here.
Really rough guess, I would guess early September. We should have a really good handle by the end of August how much demand we're going to see for the money. And if we develop a long queue of businesses in the waiting list, we certainly would come back to the cities maybe in early September and say, is there a chance that you might work with us to keep that program going just a little longer? And honestly, the truth is that if we don't get the money out by December 15th, it goes back to the federal government, so we don't get to spend it. So we're kind of under a very short period of time to get the dollars into the hands of businesses that really need it and really need it badly.
Members of the EDA, what questions do you have? Not hearing any. Thank you, Chris, and look forward to the program being rolled out and certainly learning more on how Forest Lake might partner. One of my concerns on us considering some additional expanded programming in that area is how do we administer? And so if there's an opportunity for us to piggyback on an existing program that's got some parameters in place and some evaluation criteria, and if we can be a funding source to that, that is attractive in many ways. So look forward to hearing more.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
All right. Anything further this evening? We do have a few minutes before our council meeting here at the top of the hour. And anything further to come before us? I have a couple of logistics notes just to make sure everyone's got make sure everyone has everything on their calendars. Next weekend, your presence has been requested by the Planning Commission in a joint workshop between the Planning Commission, the EDA, and City Council on the topic of zoning for the Headwaters 123 parcel. You all have done a fair amount of work on that parcel, and the next step in that development plan was for the Planning Commission to consider the rezoning of that parcel. They came back with some questions, and they're asking some good questions. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to just all be aligned on what is the goals of the city, what's goals of City Council, what's the goals of EDA. And I think the Planning Commission would like to hear from all of us as they're considering the zoning considerations. So that workshop is scheduled. It is going to be a large workshop because it is a joint meeting between all three groups. We will do our best in this remote format to facilitate a good and healthy discussion. But just want to make sure that that is on your calendar. We also, if you're interested, it's been a topic of conversation in the community. We also do have a joint workshop scheduled that evening with the Planning Commission and the City Council to talk about the tiny home proposal that Faith Lutheran is planning. And so you are not formally as in part of that meeting, but it is a public meeting and you are more than welcome to attend as a participant if you're interested in that topic. So both of those are next Monday evening. Donovan, can you help me with which one is 5:30 and which one is 6:30?
The joint EDA City Council and Planning Commission meeting is at 5:30. That's regarding the Headwaters 123 property. And there's been significant discussion among the Planning Commission members on this. And I think they really wanted from the EDA a lot of the backstory and the context for it. And we will also, as one of our honored speakers, Chris Eng is volunteered to also assist with that narrative. So thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome.
Will it be possible to have the marketing brokers, CBR, there as well to talk to us about prospects, probabilities in the future?
Not Mr. Dan Peterson, but I forget the gentleman's name, but a specialist from Great River Energy who deals with these kind of tech.
Bruce Saylor.
Thank you. But we'll also be there as a resource.
Will he be talking about the technical side, or will he talk about the prospects and the competitions and the probabilities, the real needs of that site, so that we have a better understanding whether you take all of this property, and I think it was a city council decision to take all of the property and rezone it. And I still have a curiosity about that, whether it should, it has to be all of the property, whether we're going to have a long-term wait, whether we can sort of think that this is a timetable of 1 year, 2 years, or what have you. So I'm concerned that we have the marketers there as well to, complete the story.
Yeah, so it's not the marketers, but and there's obviously lots of uncertainty with this in responding to the market. However, I believe that Bruce will be prepared to speak about, to address that concern, because that's something, that's a question I've had, but also leaving it to the work that the EDA and City Council have done in reserving that entire parcel to keep most of the options on the table for any potential user or users.
And just to build off that, I will reach out to Dan Peterson, who's a broker, and I will get a current market update as to where we are. Either have him prepare a memo for it if he can attend, or have him physically or virtually attend the meeting as well. So we will have current market conditions available for that next meeting.
I agree. It'd be great to have him there if he's able to attend. I also think that Bruce has had a key role in the Washington County Technology Corridor. And so to be able to explain that portion of the relationship and the efforts that have taken place there, Bruce is well positioned, but our listing agent, who we have hired to market this property, anything we can get from him is helpful as well. All right. So those two items are workshop on, so 5:30 next Monday is the Headwaters 123, and then 6:30 is the plan session, also with Planning Commission on the Faith Lutheran tiny home community. Also wanted to just make sure, still on your calendar, Monday the 27th is our next scheduled EDA meeting. We are not meeting as a regular EDA session, but instead this is our downtown kickoff meeting. Unfortunately, the current situation with COVID just extends here, and we are not in a position of coming back in, and especially a very large group setting like we are hoping for that session. Dan is putting together some plans to use Zoom in a remote meeting, but also to use the Zoom breakout room feature to facilitate some small group discussion. I've done this a couple of times on other meetings, and perhaps some of you have as well. It works really well, and you are able to get good small group discussion. And so the goal is to still make that interactive. We're going to try to hit as many of the Goals of that meeting, as we would have had it been an in-person meeting, it is unfortunately going to be, though, given the size of the room, a remote meeting. On council's agenda later this evening is the extension of the emergency order. And should council extend that emergency order, we likely are going to be in a remote meeting situation for the foreseeable future. For quick refresher, you know, that emergency order for at the city level really just does a number of things for us. It creates that emergency management position, which Captain Weiss from the police department leads, to coordinate all of our emergency response efforts, PPE, procedures, things we need to be doing from a city perspective. It allows us to meet publicly in these remote sessions because that is otherwise not allowed by our rules of procedure. So it provides a remote meeting session. And then the other thing that big portion that emergency declaration does for us is it allows us to be eligible for reimbursement funding. And so for all of those reasons, I plan on supporting that extension of the emergency order because I think at the city level, it makes sense. I know there's been some pushback at the state level, and the governor got some pushback, especially today on his extension. I think it's a little bit different at the state level than what we're doing here at the city, but just wanted to provide that update. I miss seeing you all in person, but this COVID beast is not going away anytime soon. So let's be safe. Any questions on any of those updates? Not seeing any and not having anything else on our agenda this evening, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, excuse me, Mark, if I can ask one other question here. I had asked.
Absolutely.
I had asked at the last workshop, I guess, towards the end about just some questions on the food truck and the temporary trailer situation, and staff was going to kind of look into that, and just wondered if there's any report there. You know, I think it's great for example, the coffee shop up on the corner. I think it's great. There was another food truck there as well this weekend. I did see a sign at the Forest Lake Skate and Cycle saying skate and cycle parking only, and there's parking on both sides of North Shore and on that frontage road there. So I think it's great. It's more business, but yet, you know, my concern all along is always trying to keep these food trucks or temporary businesses on the same playing field or level playing field as our brick and mortar that are here year round paying taxes and supporting the community. So that just continues to be my concern, I guess.
We will get that answer. Donovan, if you want to try to answer that, but I think we can come back with an answer on that one.
Yeah, Blake, I could add a little bit here. I have informed the owner that it's a maximum of 30 days at that one location, and only one sandwich sign is allowed during business operating hours. Also, Coffee Smith, that proposed coffee shop, is going to be on that August 26th Planning Commission agenda for a site plan review. So they've just submitted, and so they are looking to get their brick and mortar status.
All right. Donovan, did you say that so there was a site plan review planned at the end of August?
That's
for the
correct.
Coffee
Right.
Smith site?
Right.
Okay, thank you. You know, we're at this, you know, we have the current rules around, you know, food trucks, and we can revisit those at any time and decide if we wanted something that was more restrictive, and, you know, happy to accommodate those requests. We are in a bit of an awkward time to be making some of those more restrictive because we have opened things up so much in other areas given COVID. So I do think it is a balance, but, you know, certainly things around parking and still wanting to have a level playing field is important. It's just a bit of an awkward consideration right now because, again, we've opened up a lot of restrictions. So, all right, not hearing anything else or having anything else on our agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
move we adjourn.
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Roberts,
Aye.
Commissioner Huntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Finneman,
Aye.
Commissioner Large,
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson,
Aye.
President Bain.
Aye. And we are adjourned. I look forward to seeing you all next week.